Hello friends, I won't take much of your time. I just ask you to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
You know it's bad when your family's holiday pic drops on Facebook. And not only am I missing, they even got bold enough to caption it just the core crew for the third year in a row. You start asking yourself questions you shouldn't be asking, like, do they even realize I'm still alive? Or is there some family group chat where they agreed to just delete me from existence? And while those sound dramatic when you say them out loud, when you've been quietly erased for years and the people doing the erasing share your last name, it stops feeling dramatic and starts feeling inevitable. I'm Robin, and for as long as I can remember, I've been orbiting my own family like Pluto, technically part of the solar system, but never really in the mix. At 27, I had spent the last few Christmases watching my parents, my younger brother Dean, his wife, who used to be my best friend in high school, by the way, and their two kids gather at Grandma's place in Ohio like some suburban Norman Rockwell painting. There's always snow, always matching flannel pajamas, always Grandma's dumb old wooden reindeer decorations in the background, and always that caption, just the core crew. As if I died and they never got around to announcing it. I didn't grow up estranged. I didn't do anything you'd point to and say, yeah, well, that explains it. I didn't commit a crime, or run off and join a cult, or even miss a birthday party unless I was sick. What I did do, apparently, was grow into a version of myself that didn't fit the image they were trying to project. I moved to Seattle, I worked in tech, I dated women, I said things out loud like therapy changed my life, and maybe we shouldn't joke about that. I guess I got too different, too outspoken, too independent, too inconvenient. The first year they posted that photo without me, I thought it was an accident. I had declined the trip that year because of a brutal work deadline. But I still mailed gifts to every single person in that picture. When I saw it on Facebook, I laughed at first, like, oh man, awkward crop, but hey, whatever. I even commented, missing you all from snowy Seattle, with a smiley face. Nobody responded, not even Grandma. The second year they didn't invite me. That one stung. My mom sent a mass text 3 days before Christmas saying, hope everyone has travel plans confirmed. Can't wait to see the core crew together again. I stared at the message for 10 full minutes, wondering if I'd somehow fallen off a list, or if maybe I was just losing my grip on what family meant anymore. When the photo went up that year, same pajamas, same reindeer, same just the core crew caption, I didn't comment. I just muted them all. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was building something out here, something real, something mine. By the third year, it was just funny. Not haha funny, but laugh into your wine glass kind of funny. They didn't even pretend to check if I was free. And when that photo dropped, God, the nerve. They had a freaking drone shot, like a cinematic wide-angle photo of everyone toasting cocoa in the snow, with that same dead-eyed caption. That's when something in me snapped. Not in an angry, I'm gonna throw my phone way. More like in a, oh, okay, bet. Let's make this interesting way. Because here's the thing they don't know. While they were cozying up in their matching Target outfits, I was building a company. Not just some Etsy side hustle. A real bootstrapped, code-heavy, pain-in-the-ass to launch SaaS company that started out of my cramped apartment with a whiteboard and 4 maxed-out credit cards. And last fall, right before my 29th birthday, it happened. We got acquired. The paperwork went through, and just like that, I had 7 figures in the bank before 30. I hadn't told anyone, not friends, not old coworkers, not even Casey, my ride-or-die best friend who had been by my side since college. I was sitting on the biggest flex of my life, and suddenly, that stupid family photo became the perfect stage. I Googled Billboard companies in Ohio. You'd be surprised how cheap they are in small towns, especially when you're only renting for 2 weeks. I found one right across from Grandma's subdivision, next to the parking lot of a diner where half the town hangs out on Sundays after church. I didn't want anything nasty. I wasn't going to post their photo or write something petty. No, this needed to be classier than that. This had to feel like elegance with a middle finger tucked inside. So I went with bold white text on a clean black background. Nothing flashy, nothing crude, Just one sentence. Guess who just became a millionaire before 30? No name, no photo, no company logo, just a question they'd know the answer to the second they saw it. I didn't even need to sign it. They'd get the message. As I stared at the digital mock-up on my laptop, my phone buzzed. It was a group text. Dad, Dean, Mom. A photo of the family in their pajamas, arms around each other in front of the fireplace. "Merry Christmas from the core crew," the caption read. No heart emoji, no wish you were here, nothing. I looked back at the billboard on my screen, then I clicked confirm. Installation scheduled for December 23rd. Right in time for Grandma's Christmas Eve brunch. Right in time for everyone to drive past it on the way to what used to be my holiday too. This year, they wouldn't forget I existed. This year, I wasn't out of frame. I was the frame. I didn't sleep the night after I confirmed the order for the billboard. And it wasn't because of excitement or nerves, but more like the steady buzz of adrenaline that doesn't let you settle. Like your whole body knows you've just done something irreversible and now it's waiting for the fallout, pacing the halls of your mind like a night security guard who doesn't trust the locks. The billboard company, some small-town outfit called Mayfield Outdoor Advertising, emailed me a final proof that next morning with a chirpy, "Let us know if this looks good" message. And as I stared at the clean black and white layout on my screen, I felt the first flicker of giddy satisfaction pulse through me. It was perfect. It was sharp, unapologetic, and most importantly, it didn't beg for attention. It commanded it. The text stood tall in all caps, centered and spacious, saying just what I needed it to say without an ounce of decoration. Guess who just became a millionaire before 30? No exclamation points, no hashtags, no desperation in the font. Just a sentence that would hang over my family's heads like a quiet, smirking cloud every time they turned into Grandma's subdivision. It would go live the morning of December 23rd, which gave them about 24 hours to stew in it before their big family brunch. That felt generous, honestly. I didn't tell anyone, not even Casey, which was a personal record for me, because normally she'd be the first person I'd call when something as petty and glorious as this came together. But I needed this to be mine, just for a minute. I needed to sit in the solitude of it, let the satisfaction simmer before I let anyone poke at it with questions about whether it was the healthy choice or if I was really over them like I said. And honestly, I was over them, at least the version of them that could gather every December, smile for the camera, and pretend like I didn't exist while somehow managing to post it in public with the smugness of people who thought that if they repeated the same caption enough times, it would eventually become truth. A few days before the billboard went up, I got a call from the guy installing it, a man named Brett, who had the friendly, vaguely suspicious tone of someone who didn't want to be involved in drama, but also very much was. He asked casually if this was like a marketing stunt or a political thing. And when I told him no, he let out this relieved laugh like he'd dodged a landmine. He said it looked great, very clean, and then asked if I was okay with it being visible from the church lot. I said I was more than okay with it. In fact, I hoped it was. The night before installation, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I pulled up the Zillow listing for Grandma's Street just to get a bird's eye view of where everything would land. The billboard stood kitty corner from her front porch, and if you angled your head just right, you'd see it from her kitchen window while pouring a cup of coffee. It wasn't just visible, it was inescapable. And that, frankly, was the whole point. By the time December 23rd rolled around, I was in Ohio. I told myself I needed to be there to see it in person, but the truth was, I wanted to watch them see it. I booked a room at the cheapest hotel within driving distance of Grandma's house, some highway-side joint with terrible carpet and a continental breakfast that tasted like cardboard, and spent the morning parked across the street from the billboard in a rental car, hood up, hat low, like a spy who was also extremely emotionally invested in petty family politics. It was freezing, but I didn't care. The moment the digital display switched from its placeholder ad to the line I'd written, I swear the air got crisper. I watched it flicker on, bold and clean against the dull gray sky, And I laughed. Not loud, not wild, just that thought-shaking kind of laugh that bubbles up when you realize you've actually gone and done the thing you said you would, even when no one believed you would follow through. Around noon, the first wave of cars started pulling up. I recognized my brother's truck immediately. He'd always had a taste for obnoxiously large vehicles, even before the kids. His wife, Lauren, was in the passenger seat, holding a tray of what I assumed were her famous sugar cookies. And the kids were in the back watching something on an iPad. They didn't see it at first, not until Dean stepped out and turned to help unload the trunk. His head tilted up slightly, then froze. He tapped Lauren, pointed. Her expression didn't change, but her body did. She stiffened like someone had poured ice water down her spine. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know exactly what they were saying. Dean probably muttered, "Is that Robin?" And Lauren would have responded with something sharp like, "Well, who else would it be?" And then there would have been that pause, the one where you realize the universe is no longer in your control, and the person you thought you'd left behind has just outmaneuvered you on your own turf. Other cars arrived. Uncle Dave, who hadn't spoken to me since I came out, Aunt Cheryl, who used to knit me scarves until I moved to Seattle and apparently became too big for homemade gifts. Each one of them had to drive past that sign. Each one had to read that sentence and sit with whatever image of me they'd been carrying around, the disappointment, the rebel, the outcast, and reconcile it with the reality that I had done something big, something they couldn't ignore, and worst of all, something they hadn't been invited to witness. I stayed parked across the street until nightfall, watching the sun set behind that sign like it was my own personal stage light. I didn't go inside. I didn't call. I didn't even text. I just watched. And then, right as I was about to start the engine and drive back to the hotel, I saw her, Grandma. She stepped out onto the porch, a shawl around her shoulders, her face tilted up toward the billboard like she was squinting to read it. She didn't say anything. She didn't smile, but she saw it. And that was enough. At least, for now. Christmas morning in Ohio always smelled the same, no matter how many years I spent away from it. The crisp sting of frost in the air, mixing with the heavy, slow waft of bacon frying somewhere down the block, maybe in a neighbor's house, or maybe already in Grandma's cast iron pan, and layered over it all, that faint, unmistakable scent of pine, synthetic or not, always clinging to every wall and coat and hand towel, like a memory that refused to fade. I woke up early, not because I had plans or excitement, but because my body refused to rest, humming like a live wire stretched too tight between two poles, one of pride and one of anticipation, the good kind and the kind that makes your stomach feel like a stone. I didn't rush. I took my time showering in the tiny hotel bathroom with the water pressure that could barely rinse shampoo, staring at the cracked mirror while brushing my teeth, trying to decide if I looked smug or just tired, and whether there was even a difference at this point. I pulled on jeans and a thick sweater, nothing fancy but not forgettable either, and then drove the 15 minutes to Grandma's like I was just another local heading out to grab a paper. The air was sharp, sunlight bouncing off patches of snow that had started to melt just enough to reflect everything in a kind of dull, wintry glare. And as I turned onto her street, I saw it again, that billboard bold and quiet, just sitting there like it owned the block. I parked across the street, engine idling, watching as the same cars from yesterday rolled up and parked in the gravel spots along the drive. It was always the same people every year, the core crew, as they so lovingly referred to themselves. Dean and Lauren had arrived early, probably to help Grandma set the table, which she never actually needed help with, but always allowed for the sake of appearances. Then came Uncle Dave, carrying his usual bottle of bourbon even though it was barely 10 in the morning, and Aunt Cheryl with her too loud laugh and tray of deviled eggs that everyone pretended to love. I waited until most of them were already inside before stepping out of the car, the cold biting at my cheeks like it was punishing me for coming home. As I crossed the street, I caught the moment Dean saw me. He was just stepping out for a smoke, something he'd picked up again since his second kid was born, and for a split second, he looked like a man seeing a ghost. half recognition, half confusion, and maybe a little bit of fear, like he wasn't sure if I was real or some kind of revenge-fueled hallucination. He didn't say anything right away, just stood there holding his lighter midair as I walked up the path and toward the porch. "You here for the sign unveiling or the eggs?" he asked finally, flicking the lighter once and inhaling like it was the only thing grounding him. "I was hoping for awkward silences and long stares," I said, and we both smiled without any real joy. Inside it was warmer, in temperature and in tension, like someone had sealed a family secret into the walls and it had been cooking all night. Grandma was at the table, already dressed in her usual Christmas sweater. This year's had a giant felt snowman that looked like it had been sewn on during a wine night gone wrong. She looked up when I stepped inside, blinked once, then stood slowly like she wasn't sure whether to hug me or demand an explanation. "Robin," she said, voice soft and unreadable. "Well, aren't you something?" "I brought a gift," I said, holding up the envelope I'd been clutching in my coat pocket since the billboard had gone up. She didn't take it right away. She just stared at it, then at me, then back at the envelope like she was trying to X-ray it with her eyes. Eventually, she reached for it, fingers trembling just a little, and opened it with a care usually reserved for letters from the dead. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the deed to her house, marked paid in full, notarized and signed under my name. I hadn't planned to say anything dramatic, but I felt myself speak anyway. "No more mortgage, no more payments. It's yours, for real this time." The room was silent. Not shocked or joyful, just stunned in that hollow, echoing way that told me they didn't know what to do with generosity that came wrapped in barbed wire. My mom stood in the kitchen doorway, hand still holding a dish towel she wasn't using, and my dad was frozen in mid-pour over the coffee pot like he couldn't decide whether to keep pretending or finally confront what was happening. "Why would you?" Grandma began, but her voice cracked, and she stopped. "Because I could," I said, not with arrogance, but with the clarity of someone who's been waiting years to prove she was capable of more than being forgotten. Dean stepped back inside, eyes narrowed like he was trying to solve a math problem he hadn't been prepared for. "So the sign," he said slowly, "that was you." "It was always me," I replied, and let the sentence hang in the air, like the last word of a confession nobody wanted to hear. My mother finally moved. She walked toward me, slow, careful, and I braced myself for a slap or a hug or something in between. But she didn't touch me. She just stood there, inches from my face, eyes glassy and voice trembling. "I was proud of you," she said, and then, almost like it hurt to admit it, I just didn't know how to say it without making everything worse. "You made it worse anyway," I said. Not out of cruelty, but because sometimes the truth is a wound that needs to bleed before it can heal. We didn't resolve anything that day. There were no grand reconciliations or teary-eyed apologies. Instead, we sat around the table, eating deviled eggs and pretending everything was fine, the billboard watching us through the frosted windows like a silent judge. I didn't stay long, just long enough to be seen, long enough to remind them that erasing me wasn't as easy as clicking crop. As I stepped back outside into the cold afternoon, Grandma met my eye through the window, still holding the deed, still unsure of what to say. I gave her a nod. She didn't return it, but she didn't look away either. And sometimes, in families like mine, that's the closest thing to a win you're ever going to get. The day after Christmas has always carried its own quiet melancholy, like the air itself is heavier, stretched thin from the emotional weight of forced joy and tightly packed gatherings. And this year, that strange silence felt even denser, as if every breath held the echo of a conversation that no one was ready to finish. The roads in Grandma's neighborhood were slick with that particular kind of slush that only Midwestern winters can produce. Half frozen, half melted, just dangerous enough to keep people moving slower than usual. Heads down, coats zipped high, eyes avoiding contact unless absolutely necessary. I sat in my car again, across from that billboard, watching the way its clean white letters stood out against the gray December sky, and for the first time, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt exposed. When I pulled into Grandma's driveway, the house looked quieter than usual. The decorations were still up, the plastic snowman in the yard, the oversized wreath on the door, the string of mismatched lights that blinked like they were trying to send Morse code. But the energy inside had shifted. It was as if the air itself knew that something unspoken had been cracked open yesterday, and while no one had said it outright, we had all felt the tremor. I let myself in without knocking. Grandma never locked the door anyway, and even if she had, I think by now I would have walked through it anyway. Inside, the house was still dressed in its festive best, but the mood was subdued, like a party that had gone on just a little too long. I found Grandma in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot that smelled like vegetable soup and old traditions. She looked up when I entered, didn't smile, but didn't frown either. Just that measured glance of someone who spent a lifetime learning to control what her face reveals. "I thought you might come back," she said, voice even and low, like she'd been practicing the line. "I figured there were a few things left unsaid," I replied, not out of confrontation, but because the truth tends to creep in when the performance ends. We sat in silence for a while, sipping from mugs that neither of us seemed particularly interested in. And then, without prompting, she said something that caught me completely off guard. "Your mother didn't come up with Core Crew, that was me." I looked at her, waiting for the punchline, for the clarification that would somehow soften the blow, but it never came. Just that same quiet tone, firm and unapologetic. "I started using it a few years ago," she continued, staring into her mug like it held the rest of her explanation. "Not because I wanted to hurt you, but because it was easier. Your mom was struggling, your dad didn't know how to bridge the gap, and Dean always takes the path with the least resistance." I wanted to interrupt, to demand what she meant by easier, but I couldn't find the words fast enough. "We weren't trying to erase you," she said, and then added with an unsettling calm, "We just didn't know how to include you without breaking something else." The audacity of that sentence sat in my chest like a brick. I took a breath, then another, trying to make space for what she was really saying, that my exclusion hadn't been an accident, but a calculated choice, a decision made in the name of peace, a peace I was never offered the chance to protect. "You mean you chose not to deal with the discomfort?" I said slowly. "So instead, you made me the discomfort." Grandma didn't deny it. She didn't apologize either. She just looked at me with that same expression I'd seen at so many family dinners. One part pity, one part disappointment, and maybe, just maybe, a sliver of regret. Before I could say anything else, the front door creaked open and my mom walked in. Her expression tired in a way that made her look 10 years older than she had yesterday. She paused when she saw us, then joined us at the table without speaking. For a long moment, the three of us just sat there, generations layered in silence, each carrying a different piece of the same fractured story. "I was afraid of losing everything," my mom said finally, voice barely more than a whisper. "When you started speaking your truth, I was proud of you, but I also knew what it meant. I knew the cousins would start asking questions. I knew your father wouldn't know what to say. And I didn't want to be the one defending choices I didn't make." "That's not defending," I said carefully. "That's abandoning." "I know," she whispered. "And I'm sorry." It was the first time I'd heard those words from her in over a decade, and while they didn't undo the years or rewrite the narrative, they pierced through something cold and hard that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying in my chest for that long. But just as the weight of that moment started to settle, my phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Casey, a screenshot of a Facebook post from someone in town, a photo of the billboard with the caption, "Looks like someone's family drama just hit Main Street." The post already had over 400 likes and dozens of comments, speculating, judging, praising, mocking. I handed the phone to my mom and then to Grandma, letting them see what the rest of the world was now talking about. "You made a splash," Grandma said dryly, and for a second, I almost laughed. I didn't do it for them, I said. I did it for me. But they're watching now, she replied, voice quiet but pointed. So what are you going to do with their attention? I didn't answer. I wasn't sure yet. Because while revenge had been satisfying, in its way, it hadn't brought the closure I thought it would. It hadn't erased the years or filled in the gaps or even changed how they saw me, not really. But it had cracked something open, and what I saw behind that crack wasn't hatred or rejection. It was fear, fear of change, fear of conflict, fear of me being exactly who I am and demanding to be seen for it. And now, with the town watching, with the internet leaning in, with my family finally acknowledging the choices they made, I realized that maybe this wasn't about revenge anymore. Maybe it never was. The morning after everything became public was different in that oddly surreal way. Life sometimes turns when your private rebellion slips out into the world and starts living its own life, growing legs and feet and opinions that you didn't authorize. And suddenly you're no longer just a woman who rented a billboard across from her grandma's house. You've become a symbol, a cautionary tale, an internet curiosity, a story people chew on at their brunch tables without ever knowing your name, while you sit quietly at the edge of it all, wondering if the noise is a reward or a consequence. I woke up to nearly a dozen missed calls, texts from numbers I didn't recognize, DMs from people who claimed to be high school classmates, colleagues, podcast producers, and even one low-tier celebrity who thought my statement was brilliant, which made me want to vomit and laugh in the same breath. The post had gone viral, or at least viral enough to become local legend, especially in the kind of small town where viral meant that the coffee shop owner was offering a free muffin to anyone who could guess who the mystery millionaire was. They guessed wrong, mostly. People from old graduating classes, estranged cousins, even some guy who had dated my cousin Anna back in the mid-2000s. No one guessed me, not at first, which told me everything I needed to know about how invisible I had actually become. Not just excluded, not just dismissed, but genuinely erased from their idea of who might be capable of something worth paying attention to. It wasn't until someone, probably one of Dean's idiot friends from high school, shared a blurry photo of me standing near my rental car on Christmas Eve, hood up, arms crossed, face partially turned, that the dots began to connect. The comments started flooding in, some amused, some horrified, some half apologetic in that way people get when they realize they might have misjudged you but aren't ready to say it out loud. "Is that Robin?" one person wrote, and then another replied, "Didn't she move out west?" Followed by someone else chiming in, "Didn't she come out and stop talking to her family or something?" The narrative was writing itself, and I had no say in the edits. By mid-afternoon, I was back at Grandma's, not because I needed another scene, but because I owed myself a full ending, whatever that looked like. The house was quieter now. The leftovers had been wrapped up. The decorations looked more tired than festive. And even the reindeer in the yard had lost some of their defiant sparkle. I knocked this time, not out of politeness, but because I didn't want to assume that doors would stay open for me forever, not even now. Grandma answered with a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Or maybe I just hadn't noticed it through the frost of everything else. She didn't say much, just a nod, a hand gesture toward the kitchen, and suddenly we were sitting again at the same old table that had hosted decades of meals and arguments and quiet reconciliations. My mom arrived a few minutes later, this time without fanfare or expectations, and took the seat beside me like we were just two people trying to figure out how to bridge a gap that had been widening for years. I pulled out a small envelope, not another deed or dramatic gesture, just a simple card, inside of which was a printed certificate of ownership, part of the equity I had left over from the acquisition, a small but meaningful stake in the company I had built. From sleepless nights and rejection and grit. It wasn't about money, not this time. It was about legacy, about extending a piece of what I had built into the hands of the woman who had raised the woman they forgot. "I want you to have this," I told Grandma. And she didn't ask what it was, didn't hesitate. She just took it, looked at it, and after a long silence said, I always knew you'd do something big. I just didn't expect it would take a billboard to make us listen. My mother didn't speak right away, and when she finally did, it wasn't an apology or a justification, but something more complicated, something that landed heavier than anything else she'd said. You didn't just make them look at you, she said. You made me look at myself. And for the first time, I believed her, not because she said it like someone trying to win back favor, but because her eyes weren't filled with pity or guilt or even pride. They were just tired. The kind of tired that comes from finally facing the parts of yourself you've ignored for too long. Casey called later that night. She'd seen the posts, the photos, the comments. She laughed through the phone, equal parts impressed and horrified, and said, "You know this is going to follow you forever, right?" "I'm counting on it," I replied, though I wasn't sure if I meant that as a threat or a hope. We sat in silence for a bit, just the hum of the line between us, until she asked, "So what now? Billboard comes down, money spent, family stares across the table again next year. Then what?" It was a fair question. One I hadn't let myself answer because the truth was, I didn't know what came next. Maybe reconciliation, maybe distance, maybe more silence. The only thing I knew for certain was that I'd stopped asking them to see me and started seeing myself. And there was power in that, even if it didn't come with a neat little ending. Later that night, I drove back past the billboard. It was still lit, still standing tall against the empty night sky, its letters glowing like a dare. I didn't stop this time. I didn't need to. As I drove by, I thought about what Grandma said, about needing a billboard to make them listen. And I realized something that had been settling beneath the noise all along. I hadn't put that message up for them. I'd put it up for the girl I used to be, the one who spent so many years believing that being invisible was the only way to survive. In a family that feared what didn't match, I wanted her to see it, to know she made it. And maybe that was enough, or maybe, just maybe, it was only the beginning.